hosted by four-time Emmy Award-winning producer Frank Pace and retired New York City firefighter, 9/11 first responder, and Vietnam vet Billy O'Connor. Brought to you by We Can Coffee Company, manufacturer of freshly roasted premium coffee blends delivered directly to your door.
This week's guest, Florida Trial Lawyer of the Year, marathon runner and stand-up comedian Mike Freed.
My brother, how are you?
Frankie, my boy, how are you, my brother? How's everything with you today?
I'm good. Say hello to Derek Harris, our third man in the booth.
Hello.
Hello, third man.
I'm great. I'm great. The booth is really nice today.
You don't want to get the booth. You just want to be in the booth.
Hey, our guest today is Mike Freed, Attorney of the Year 2018, marathon runner, stand-up comic.
Wow. Man of many hats.
Man of many cats. You have a lot to talk about him, considering you both went into comedy late in your lives. Well, not late so much for Mike, late so much for you. It's really late for you.
It's too late for me. It's been too late for me. Those guys my age are dead.
You guys are polar opposites. He works clean and you work dirty as hell.
Oh, yeah, I'm filthy. That's why he works. And I know. That's funny. You know, I want to talk to him about comedy because, well, you know, he works. I ain't been at it that long. You know, I think all total, I've probably been doing it about 10 years. So I'd like to know how long he's been doing it.
Probably about less than 10 years.
Oh, yeah?
I believe so, but we'll ask him.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to know, some aspects of it. We'll talk comedy.
We'll talk comedy.
We'll talk running.
We'll talk lawyering.
We'll talk lawyering. Yeah, lawyering. Shysters.
Oh, great.
I'm not calling him a shyster. No, I'm just saying that in general, lawyers get a bad rap. You know, the old joke about, what he's saying, it's not enough lawyers. I mean, it's an old joke, but
that was before.
That was way before. So we got a lot to talk about, and he actually does a lot of good work for poor people, which I like to pick his brain about.
Good.
Because I'm going to help you. Yeah, I've been a poor person all my life. I'm the only guy I know that can't go bankrupt because there's no sense. You're already bankrupt.
No sense. No SENSE or CENTS.
CENTS. Yeah. No sense.
So what do you want to talk about?
I don't know. What do you want to talk about? You want to talk about current events? You want to talk about what's going on in the world?
How's your Bitcoin doing, Billy?
How's your Bitcoin
Jesus
doing?
Christ almighty. So I tell you, I'll bring this whole country to its knees. I really will. No matter what I put. If I put a nickel in there, I zig and should zag. I bought some, this guy gave me, naturally the way I get my tips. This is the way I get my stock market information. A friend of mine who's manages a big apartment building in Manhattan, right? And it's in Sutton Place. Now, Frank, you're familiar with Sutton Place. Sutton Place, for those of you not familiar with it, is across the street from the UN, and it's old money. I mean, it makes Park Avenue look like a ghetto. Sutton Place is money. Because I know, because I used to deliver appliances close as I ever got to Sutton Place. But he told me the guy is the manager of the building. In other words, he's the handyman. Anything goes wrong, he fixes it.
Sure.
And he makes about $220,000 a year.
Of course.
Because it's Sutton Place, But on Christmas time, he gets like $30,000, $40,000 in tips. Because everybody...
He declares it, right?
Yeah, he's a friend of mine, but he's on the level. With all my friends... Anyway, he gets like about $30,000 in tips. So this one guy gives him a tip. And says, look, he says, here's $3,000, you're great, do a great job, whatever. He says, but if I was you, and I put it into Cardano, which is a crypto, it's a new crypto. And he says, I'm telling you, just keep buying Cardano. Don't look. If I'm right, he says, you know what, your grandchildren after me. If I'm wrong, you're out $3,000. Right. Don't go crazy, but, put it into Cardano. So I bought Cardano because some guy told the janitor, what That's where I get my stock info from. And it's been like an emotional escalator. I look at it every day. It's kind of cool because it's action, but it's up 20%, it's down 20%. It's up 25%, it's down 25%. So it's juice. I don't like juice. But no, I ain't going to make any money on it, Frank.
Cardano, huh?
Cardano.
I wish you didn't tell me that.
Why?
Well, God.
Well, you know what?
I'm not going to look it up. I'm going to forget it at the minute we finish this podcast.
That's your best move. But here's the kicker. The kicker says, this guy says, my uncle, who lives in certain place, my uncle's a billionaire and he lives in Switzerland. And he's the guy who told me, get on this. It's going to be the next big thing. And then I did a little research. About 15 minutes worth of research. And the second biggest crypto is what, Ethereum? Is that what it is?
I don't pronounce it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Ethereum.
Yeah, Ethereum is the second. But the same guy who is behind Ethereum is behind this Cardano. And according to the research I've done, it's 1,000 times faster than Bitcoin when they're doing transactions. So it's like, I think I bought in at 96 cents, and now it's like at $1.70. But it fluctuates from like $1.20 to $2.39 back. It's an emotional roller coaster, which is my life, Frank.
I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. Cardano sounds like a horse running in the 8th race at Belmont.
If it was, I'd stand a better chance.
Yeah, but it will come in 8th also.
Yeah, but some billionaire in Switzerland told this guy who told the janitor in the building. So that's where I get my stock tips, Frank. I'm on it. I'm on it.
Let's bring Mike Fried on.
Let's got some real info for us.
Derek, can you get Michael?
Yeah, let's get him on. All right.
Hey, Mike Fried, how are you, my friend?
Good. I'm ready for this episode of Money Management.
You hope you're paying attention to this, Michael. Did you take notes? Because I'm the guy.
That's Billy O'Connor. That's Derek. That's Derek Harris, right? Derek Harris. And that's Mike Fried.
Michael,
welcome to the show.
If you do write down my stock tips, just be aware that I couldn't pick a winner in a one-horse race. I mean, I'm the worst. I'll probably bring this whole country to its knees. Crypto will come crashing down.
So, Mike, we want to open with a question for you. We do a segment on this show called Florida Man. What the hell is it with Florida people? You're lawyer of the year in Jacksonville, Florida. Tell us a little bit about Florida men and women.
Well, I don't know what happens in Florida. I think we tend to attract people because it's not like there's any secret about Florida man and Florida woman. So I suspect that it becomes self-fulfilling, right? The people are coming here to let it all hang out.
Literally, and probably a Walmart.
Yeah, not surprisingly, it's not hard to find good, funny stories about stupid things that people do down here.
Yeah.
Yeah, a guy just sent me one the other day that some girl is suing her father for throwing a slice of pizza at her. Assault with a slice of pizza. Florida man.
Serious. That's serious. Maybe she was kosher.
Yeah, you're a lawyer in Florida, but a very esteemed lawyer. And what's the strangest thing anybody ever came to you with a case in Florida? That you just said, okay, this is beyond the pale. I can't take this.
There's no shortage of them. You guys will appreciate this. I think one of the funniest, and I use this as an example whenever somebody wants me to bring a lawsuit for defamation, because the best thing you can do if you think someone's defaming you most of the time is just let it run its cycle, and then you're done with it. But if you fight it or you bring attention to it, all you're doing is creating 5 news cycles out of one. But I had somebody come to me once when I was a young, hungry lawyer, and they had a restaurant up in Fernandina Beach. And they were upset because they said that the police were spreading rumors that their chef had AIDS. And the first thing they wanted to do was to put a sign on the door that says, "Our chef does not have AIDS."
That's a come on. That'll make you line up to get in there.
It did not seem like the best advertisement, even if it is a true statement.
So, Mike, you're a fascinating guy. I first met Michael at Jacksonville University when we were both on the board of trustees together. And I was, I saw this button-down guy with a bald head, and I said, oh, geez, another stiff. Not that there were any stiffs on the Jacksonville University board, because many of my good friends came off the Jacksonville University board. But then I got to meet Mike and know him, and I was amazed by his background. I don't think you were even running marathons. I mean, running marathons then, were you, Mike?
No, I mean, I do everything backwards. I became a runner because I had an idea to raise money, or at least I wanted to have an impact in the indigent community. And what I've realized from just being around fundraisers and trying to get people's money for philanthropy or campaigns or whatever the purpose may be, is that people want to see you invested before they invest. And so I thought, what could I do that would let people know that I'm serious about this and would like them to dig in for $500 rather than $50? And I thought, what if I run across the state? And so I very quietly said, that's a good idea, but I don't want to tell anybody I'm going to do that because I'm not sure I can run. I really had not been a runner at all. When I say at all, maybe I'd run 3 miles at one time in my life.
What year was this we're talking about?
This is 2016, so really polarized time. Yeah. So everything was so polarized, not that it's gotten any better. And I wanted to do something that, nobody would be against, right? Every other cause, it seems like there's a for and against. I wanted to do something only people would be for. And so I went down to Apalachicola and ran a small marathon there very poorly. And I was like, okay, I guess I could do this. And then for the next 6 months, every month I ran either a marathon or an ultra marathon. And I told my wife, hey, when the girls get out of school, we're going to Tallahassee, and we're going to run back from Tallahassee to Jacksonville, 6 marathons in 6 days, and we're going to raise some money. And that's what I did in each one.
Full marathons at 26.2 miles, correct?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because this is a event to not only raise money, but to bring awareness to pro bono work that lawyers do. We're not all shysters.
No reflection on you, Mike. But from our audience out there, that's some run that he's talking about. He's talking about from Tallahassee east to west in Florida. That's quite a bite. I mean, that's a long haul.
Yes, and I think one of the remarkable things is usually when you run a marathon, it takes 30 days to recuperate. Mike didn't even have 30 hours. He was he had 8 hours or 10 hours to recuperate, and then he was back at it again. So he was marathon, go to bed, marathon, go to bed, marathon, get up and run and go to bed. I mean, what was it like?
Yeah, you're right. That's the trick. I'm not the fastest runner, and there's people that have done more significant things, even in the multiple marathon space. But what seems to be my little superpower is the ability to recover quickly and then get up the next morning and do something. And I attribute it to a lifetime of not playing sports and joining the debate club. Because, I have a lot of eligibility.
That is remarkable, not having pain after work. My son-in-law is a marathon runner, and the day after, he's crippled, absolutely crippled.
Yeah, it's odd. I mean, I've figured out some tricks for recovery and recovering quickly. Obviously, ice and using different ointments and elevating your feet and all that type of thing, and eating the right things. But that seems to be something that I can do pretty well. So that's what I exploit for the benefit of charity.
Now you still run, Michael, right? You're still a runner.
I do. I mean, basically, my goal was to run these 6 every year. I've done this now 4 years in a row. I'll do it again November 15th through the 20th. And it's become much more than just me, even though so far I'm the only one who runs each year, all of them, although I'm hoping to attract others to that. But I get people to run at least a marathon a day. I've got teams of 10 that come out and do it in a relay fashion. We have a company that sponsors us and provides transportation for folks to come out, and basically it's like a little Amway pyramid, because each runner raises $1,000, each team raises $10,000, and then we've got a foundation that's agreed to match every donation by 125%. So in 4 years, we've been able to raise $1.5 million, which is great.
Remarkable.
That's great.
That's remarkable, and it all goes to the indigent.
It all goes to the indigent. Yeah, it's a specific cause for the first 5 years, and that is we're helping to provide legal services and counsel for pediatric patients and their families to help them pay for their treatments, to help them get access if they're in a wheelchair, to help deal with guardianship issues and the whole panoply, if I can use a big word, of legal problems that you wouldn't think, but pediatric patients and their families encounter.
Billy, didn't you invest in Panoply?
If I did, we wouldn't be talking about it. We'd be out of business by now. But tell me, and it's an addiction. I mean, it's a positive addiction, but of course, it's still an addiction. Do you find it's more about between your ears than it is having your legs move? I mean, you're forcing yourself to be alone with yourself for 3 or 4 hours, or more.
Yeah, I think that's a fair observation. The cardio is not really an issue anymore. Again, I'm not running 6-minute miles. I think for really fast runners, there's a cardio component. My heart beats real slow, and I can run long distances without exhausting myself. The mechanics, about the same. Usually I'm good for at least one injury or sprain or ache or pain, and then that sort of becomes the thing your mind wants to keep gravitating towards for the rest of the run. But yeah, it can either be inspiring and fun, or it can be really boring. And if you've ever driven from Tallahassee to Jacksonville, it's a really boring drive. It's a reasonably interesting run, or at least it's become that for me. I know the cows by name now, I feel like. There's some interesting sights along the way. There's a drive-through prayer depot that I've found. There's 2 jails or prisons, and imagine their surprise when this little white bald guy creeps up on them, and they're doing the chain gang thing on the side of the road.
They still have those in Florida, don't they?
They do. They're out there. Yeah, they're out there doing work, and they're like, just yelling at me and chatting
running
with me.
Past the sign, don't pick up any hitchhikers. That's always the sign by the prisons in Florida. Don't pick up any hitchhikers.
Yeah, which troubles me, because what if I need a ride while I'm doing the run?
Well, I once knew a guy who's now no longer with us. He ran across Canada because he had leukemia, and it ultimately he died of leukemia. Canada, and they asked him once, how did he survive? Or what was his motivation? And he said, I just wanted to go from one telephone pole to the next. Just
Wow.
My goal was always the next telephone pole, the next telephone pole, the next telephone pole. And then sooner enough, I was across Canada.
It's like skiing. If you're not a good skier, you ski to a spot, and get down a mountain. Yeah, that makes sense.
You're a skier?
Mm-hmm.
Huh?
I can't picture you as a skier.
I've skied. I'm not saying I'm a skier. I've skied. I've been a comic too, but I'm not saying I'm a comic. But I've done comedy, which I want to talk to you about too, because you've had such a diverse life. It's really wild.
Yeah, but before we do that, why don't you tell me a little about your educational background? How did you get to be a lawyer? How did you go from the debate club to Gunster?
Yeah, good question. Thank you. So I went to JU. You and I have that in common.
We do.
And, I was I know JU was probably the Harvard of Jacksonville when you were there, but I went to Jacksonville. I went to JU because I was a late bloomer academically. I was one of these guys that always thought I was smart and always had a dream, but didn't put the effort in. And JU was a wonderful place for me because I got serious about education and did very well there. Got into Georgetown Law and went back to Maryland, where I was from. In the DC area, and did very well at Georgetown, graduated near the top of my class, and was going to stay up in DC and started working at one of the largest law firms, a firm called Skadden Arps, which at the time was maybe 3,000 lawyers. Now I think it's probably 5,000 lawyers, and they paid me very well and worked me very hard and started having a family. And decided that in DC you can throw a rock and hit a lawyer, and a lot of people do.
Put that in routine.
It probably is.
Decided I would like to move. We had my wife and I, my ex-wife now, but we were like, we could work and live anywhere. Why not, Hilton Head? Why not somewhere else? And we had spent time in Jacksonville. We met at JU. And I looked around and found a very good law firm in Jacksonville in 1995 that I could work at and afford to pay my student loans back, and moved down here and never looked back. And what happened is, Jackson, I came here for work life balance reasons, but it's really a nice place to practice. It's a nice, you can be a bigger fish in a smaller pond in Northeast Florida. If you kind of do what's ordinary in LA or DC, you can stand out and really be successful. So I've been able to have a, moderately big impact in my community and in the state, and in my profession. I think in large part because I came back to Jacksonville rather than just became another lawyer in DC.
Yeah, and you're mostly invested in the community. That's the big thing. You want to live where you work. You hate to be a guy just in a place because of work. That's truth.
Michael, you had mentioned that you were a late bloomer when you went back to school. How old were you when you went to Jacksonville?
Well, it wasn't age-wise; it was just abilities. I just meant I didn't try very hard in high school, but no, I went straight through. I was, 18-year-old high school graduate. I went to college for the 4 years, went on to law school for 3. So I was, whatever you are, 25 years old when I was at this mega law firm and working on multi-billion-dollar transactions, and just feeling like a transaction cost. And was very happy to come down here where I could work, at least initially smaller cases and serve on boards in the community and get connected with the Professional Bar Association and, just be a bigger fish in a smaller pond.
Yep. There's a lot to be said for that.
And you started initially in Georgetown. Of course, it's a great school. And you're still a Washington Redskins fan, or they're not Washington Redskins, Washington football team?
I'm hoping he's a Jacksonville.
He's a Washington fan still.
I'm both. It's kind of funny. I'm certainly the Redskins are who I grew up with, and they got their name change going on, and I'm not sure the new name's going to be that much better with the Native American skins. It still sounds some people, but I moved down here in '95 permanently, and that's the year the Jaguars showed up. So I don't feel like I'm a traitor. I feel like I have 2 teams that I've been with since relatively the beginning, but neither of them give me much to cheer for.
Well, hopefully now that Jacksonville's got Tebow, they will give you something to cheer for.
Yeah.
I went to school with Tebow. Tebow was in UF when I was there for 2 years. Matter of fact, we won.
Is that right?
The years that I went to, I went back to school late. I went back to school. I went to college in '64. And the years I was there, we won 2 national basketball championships and 2 football championships.
You are good luck, man. And you still had some eligibility at that point. Did you play?
Yeah, I played. Yeah, play with myself. That's Michael. That's not the only playing I was doing.
There's no scholarship.
I think so, but that's something I'd be damn good at anyway. Practice. When I was young, Frank, we were very poor. I had nothing else to play with.
So when you decide to get into comedy?
Oh man, it's like everything I do. I don't get into things small. I'm one of these folks, and I've not been doing it as long as Billy. I've only been doing it about 2.5 years, and a good part of that has been during COVID. So it's been Zoom comedy and corporate events.
And it's not the same, is it, Michael? It's not the same. You got to have a live audience. I once read, and you can either affirm it or disagree with it. The comedy monologue, it's more dialogue. You have to get the audience involved with you. And I don't mean by doing crowd work. I mean, it's gotta be a dialogue.
Yeah, no, I think, and again, I would take cues from you, but I think that's right. You got to have something that you're getting feedback from, good feedback or bad feedback. It's why it's so hard to practice in front of, whatever, stuffed animals or a mirror, because there's just nothing going on. Even the worst open mic audience gives you some feedback. But because I was relatively new at it and still am, a lot of people that were whatever mentoring me in the comedic field were, I'm not going to work for a year, and I didn't want to lose momentum. So I'm like, I don't know. I'm not too proud to, if somebody wants an audience for a happy hour for an event, I'll do a Zoom comedy. And I think I've turned it into as good as it could be, where people turn on their mic so I can hear them. And, we can have some fun, but it's definitely very different than live comedy.
Now you're opening for some pretty big acts in Jacksonville, aren't you?
I'm getting lucky. Right now the clubs in Jacksonville, Comedy Zone is my home club. Because comedy's just coming back to life, are getting good folks. Jimmy Walker's been here recently, Carlos Mencia, Don Marrera, who I was able to open for, Taylor Williamson, I'm opening up for next week from America's Got Talent. And so they're coming through, and maybe they wouldn't have played the Comedy Zone before, but they are, because there's not as many choices initially, and because I've kept at it and worked with the club owner, I'm getting opportunities to open for these guys. So it's kind of fun.
That's
fun.
terrific. Yeah, it's always good when a headliner comes through that you recognize, and and they give you some encouragement. What's the best advice you ever got from a comic about comedy?
It's all of it's good right now. Some of it you just learn from making mistakes, but I think particularly for an opener, and as you know, Billy, you got to pay your dues. So even though I'm a reasonably successful lawyer and all these other things, I'm just a grunt in comedy. So if Tom Herrera wants me to go get him a cup of coffee and find a pair of shoes for him, that's what my job is, right?
Yeah.
So realizing the role of the opener and doing things that don't upstage the headliner, and sort of wake up the audience, but don't steal the thunder. Don't if you're a similar type of comic as the headliner, don't be more of that than they're going to be, and obviously stay away from their subject matters. I think at this point it's kind of like building a law career and fundraising for my marathon series. It's very relational, and it's not it's a selfish activity, as you know, in that you're sort of creating selfishly. But in terms of how you interplay with the other comedians and how you, frankly, build it as a business and get other opportunities, it's very relational.
It's funny that you said that about don't try to upend the headliner. Know your role. You get acclimated to the fact of what your job is. You do your job. You're not trying to blow away the headliner. But what I didn't know when I started doing comedy, and what you apparently did, because I've seen some of your comedy, and I liked your opening joke is about this is what a turtle looks like without a shell. That's a pretty funny line, and I was told by many comics when I first started that when you first start, Frank, you try and get 10 minutes, a solid 10, and that solid 10 you can always go to if you're having trouble, and if your time is starting to go awry and the audience is not with you, you can always go back to that solid 10. And it takes you a while to get that solid 10. But I was always told, open with your second funniest joke and close with your funniest. When you're starting, which I think is good advice, because, nobody wants to be the guy where everybody's going to get coffee when you come on stage, because you notice the comic before you was closing with his funniest joke.
Yeah.
So you better come out of the gate with a winner. Otherwise, it's like, oh, this guy, look, let me go take a leak now while this guy's up,
Yeah, no, that's what people first went off. You could lose them early, and at the end of the day, they're probably going to remember your last joke the best. And I think you ask advice that I was given. I think again, it's kind of like lawyering and just succeeding probably as a producer, and everything you do is be authentic. And so, I'm a clean comic because I tend to be clean.
That's
myself.
smart. That's just smart.
Billy's a dirty comic because he tends to be dirty.
Yeah. You know what? I tell you that's absolutely smart what he's doing. And I tell you why. And this again, when I started doing down, I was an old guy, the dirty old man. I was 62, 63, and I'm doing comedy in front of 19-year-old kids. And of course, dirty came easy to me. I'm from the streets of the Bronx, and that's the way we talk. Every other word out of our mouth was F this, F that, F this, But
by the way, you can use that. You can use the word F.
I know, but I'm cleaning it up, Frank, because our family audience that we have.
Yeah, for the thousands of people that are watching because of Mike.
But what happens is, I thought the idea was just be funny. Be funny. Whether it's dirty or clean, who cares? Just be funny. But what Michael is right about is that say you get Andrew Dice Clay, and I'm opening for Andrew Dice Clay. Well, he don't want you dirty because he's dirty.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want you stealing his thunder. Now, of course, if you're opening for a clean comic, and they got 500 people in the place to see the clean comic, and it's a family-oriented comic, and I come out and start doing big jokes, it's no good either. So you don't work. If you do dirty, unless you're big, then you can do whatever you want. But if you're starting out, you're not going to get any work. So being clean is just smart. It's a smart business.
No, I think you're right. I've certainly gotten some opportunities early on because I was clean, and I don't mind dirty comedy. It's just not. It's got to be funny. I think there are people that use curse words or dick jokes or what have you instead of humor, and I don't think that's funny. But I don't think clean jokes that are unfunny are funny. So got nothing against dirty jokes. That's not my shtick.
Yeah, well, I'll give you a piece of advice that Rosie O'Donnell gave me. If you read our book, If These Lips Could Talk, I'm not the biggest fan of Rosie O'Donnell.
We couldn't see it because
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for the
What
plug.
was that?
Right here, man.
Oh,
Got it right here.
great.
There it is.
Wait,
Thank
wait,
you,
very
Michael.
good.
I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
Hey, Michael, can you put that up again?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's sort of fading into the background.
It's going on there.
Put it in front of your face.
Well, then you can't see me.
There it is. There it is.
No, we can't
weird.
see. We can't see it. We can't see it anyway. It's chroma keyed out. The only
Is that what's going on?
we can only.
Yeah, there it is. Right
There
now,
it
your
is.
chest would work.
I can get rid of
You
the
can take his word for it.
No. We take it.
He's a lawyer. You can't be lying.
Everybody knows the book. Anyway, Rosie O'Donnell said to me, we had a friend.
There we go.
Oh,
There it is.
great.
Nice.
Thank you.
Thank you, man. And a smile, too.
And a smile, too.
Perfect.
Thanks for doing that. Now put your
pleasure.
comedy zone back up.
All right.
Hey, look at that.
Rose-
That's an organized background. I love it.
Rosie O'Donnell said to me, I said, we had a friend who will remain nameless, and I asked him if stand up in the 70s. And, he's playing cruise ships now, and or was up until the pandemic hit. And there was a bit on Saturday Night Live where they were in a stand-up club, and he was the headliner on this one-sheet billboard. And the opening acts were Jay Leno on one side of him and Jerry Seinfeld on the other side of him. And I said, why didn't this person really hit? And she said, because she didn't give he didn't give the audience a doggy bag. They didn't take home anything with him. Around the water cooler the next day, somebody would say, I saw the funniest comedian last night. And they said, what did he say that was so funny? And nobody could recall what he said. And
That's a good point.
That's a great point.
I believe that you have to give the audience a doggy bag to something they can take home with them that will be memorable about your comedy.
What makes you different?
What makes you different?
Mhm.
What makes you stand out?
Yeah, I've got a bit that I've probably done from the beginning, and it preceded COVID, but it's been compounded by COVID, and it's that I can't figure out how to greet people anymore. It's a handshake, a high five, a fist bump. Now we got the elbow, and I'm a little guy, so my aim's always off when I do try to shake hands with somebody who's bigger. And I don't know if it's funny or not, but as I'm greeting people afterwards, they're always doing the thing right back to me. They're like, "Hey, I don't know what we do here," so that's a takeaway.
Yeah, I love that. I love the line you do with the Zoom and say the thing I found out with Zoom is that's how many people still have Venetian blinds. I thought that was a great. How many minutes do you think you have now? You had been at it 3 or 4 years, and I don't know about you, Michael, but for me, that first solid 10 took me almost a year to get that first solid 10, and then after that, of course, it comes. You can't do a long set unless you do stories, unless you're Stephen Wright. You can't do a series of one-liners,
Can you let him answer you the question?
Yes, but I am. But I'm just.
Well, I'm learning. This is no. I think
Two guys talking comedy here, Frank.
I write a lot, and I think I approached it wrong in my first year because I had a surplus of ideas, and so every day I'm writing a few new jokes. I'm not saying they're good, but I'm writing a few new jokes, and so I would go out. I would do a 10 or even a 12-minute set. And I would be like, I need to scrap that and start all over again. So I was doing a new 10 or a new 12 or a new 5 or a 7. And about 6 months ago, I said, you know what? I need to pick the stuff that I like and then add and subtract. So I have done as long as a 45-minute set. I did not kill for 45 minutes, but I've got a lot of content. And now I think I'm in the process, particularly now that clubs are opening back up and I can work things out. But I will say, I don't put myself in the quality yet of these comedians, but I really am a derivative of Stephen Wright, Dimitri Martin, and even Mitch Hedberg, and sort of those guys that have 1, 2, and 3 liners, which means in a 15-minute set, I sometimes do 40 jokes. So it's I like long form. I usually have a couple of longer jokes, but that doesn't come as naturally for me. It's just maybe an intellectual joke that's just a simple line.
You mentioned writing the jokes. Jerry Seinfeld, who I considered a master craftsman of comedy, has saved every joke he's ever written. He's got him. He's got boxes and boxes and boxes full of jokes, and every time he writes a note, he just files it away because he may want to reference it 10 years from now because he didn't have a payoff before, but he may have a payoff for it now. Jay Thomas was the same way.
Joe Rivers, same thing.
Jay was the same way. Jay would be writing, and Jay was a guy who went to Jacksonville, also Emmy Award winner. He tried stand-up comedy. He didn't like it, but he had to fill 3 hours a day on the radio, so he was constantly scribbling, and he was an observational comic, as you are an observational comic, and he just wrote down every observation he had, like Jerry Seinfeld was an observational comic. They wrote down everything that would ever occur to them, and they saved him, and that's a key to a great comic, I think.
I think that's right. You got to just accumulate ideas. You can't sit down and say, I'm gonna write something funny today. But what you can do is, if you're out at the grocery store today and something occurs to you about a product or a person you encounter, just make a little note in your phone or wherever. And then when you have time to sit down and write, you say, well, what was I thinking about? And how can I build, a bit around it? And it's very scientific. It's not a casual thing, even though obviously if you're successful at it, it comes off as very casual.
Yeah, the observational comic, things that you notice that maybe everybody else thinks about, but nobody else notices. Like, you're walking down the street and you see your in the mirror in the showplace window, and you just sort of fix your hair, and then you keep moving. There's comedy in that, but whoever thinks of making a bit out of it. That's the difference between comics and...
Yeah, I don't think, like Michael said, you couldn't be more right. I mean, I think that comedy comes from, number one, you got to carry a pen. You're a writer. It's the same thing with writing. All your good stuff is in your subconscious. So you get the ideas when you're writing around your car and your mind is blank. You're in the shower. You wake up in the middle of the night. You get an idea. 3 words is all you need to trigger the memory. And you go from there. It's the same thing with writing. I think the good stuff is here. When you edit and when you write, it comes up in your brain. But the good stuff is in your heart. You got to get it out. And that's where the comedy comes from, I think.
So no, I agree. I woke up, funny you mentioned that, just 2 nights ago in the middle of the night, I woke up twice, 2 different times. And I don't know where it came from, like you say, subconscious or a dream. I had to write down a couple notes in my phone. When I woke up in the morning, they weren't half bad. I'm actually working with them, and I'm going to go workshop them today.
Yeah, it's unbelievable what you're carrying around in your subconscious. How does that work? How does that carry over into your legal profession?
Yeah, it's a good question. I like to think. I think you guys each are Renaissance people that have a lot of interests in things you've done and things you're doing. And in my case, I think it's all one brand, right? You can't say this is my humor and this is my philanthropy and this is my lawyering, because everything's connected. And if you have a social media life, which you need for each of those things, then it's not like you're going to hide this aspect of you from the people who follow the other aspect. So I think there's a time to be sarcastic, and that's usually on stage and not the courtroom. So you use different tools in different areas. But I have found that my colleagues at my law firm, it's a pretty decent sized firm, we've got about 200 lawyers, and my clients, and even other lawyers in the community are like, that is so courageous, and can't believe you're doing that. And perhaps it validates their choice of me as a lawyer or as somebody that's innovative or what have you. I'm sure there's people that think it's stupid or attention seeking, and it's probably both of those things too. But at the end of the day, all of them are who I am, and so I. For the most part, as Billy will tell you, comedy is not, hugely financially beneficial. But when I do make a little bit of money in it, I put that in the charity, and it gives me something to talk about out there that hopefully amuses people.
Nice. I got a question. Do you find yourself joking with your clients?
Yeah, there's a time and a place. I think it's always valuable to diffuse tension. And I certainly do that. But you also don't want to minimize their concerns. People trust lawyers with, pretty serious problems. And so, you got to know the person enough to know, what they will find funny. The thing about comedy and Billy knows this better than I do, but it's pretty easy to be funny when no one expects you to be funny, right? I mean, if you're in the firehouse, shooting the shit with friends, if you're just funnier than most people, they think you're hysterical. And so it is easier to be funny, even on a break in a courtroom than, 5 minutes on a stage when people have paid you to make them laugh.
Yeah, because people aren't paying $400, $500 an hour for you to make jokes.
Exactly. There is that. But you're right. 5 minutes on stage, you really don't know how long 5 minutes is or 10 minutes is until you're alone in a room doing stand-up comedy and everybody's paying attention, focused on you. And the worst is, and I'm sure this has happened to you because, you've got the balls not to be afraid to fail. And that's really important in comedy. Like, you got to learn that if you fail, you fail. But if you're on stage for 25, 30 minutes and you bomb coming out of the gate, that is the longest 30 minutes of your life. Believe me, because I've died. I've died 3 or 4 times miserably and had 45 minutes to do and getting paid for 45 minutes. And the first 10 minutes I knew I was dead and they weren't coming back. And it's a long 45. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. My longest 20 was actually, I wasn't on the stage, but it was Dom Herrera who
I know Dominic, a very funny man. Been around a long time too.
Very funny, and this might have been his first show back after being out for a year. And the headliner shows up a couple minutes before the show starts, and one of my jobs is to ask how he wants to be introduced. So he's got all kinds of credentials, Big Lebowski, and he was on Tonight Show with Johnny Carson and everything under the sun. And he says, I don't know, just say he was the voice of Hey Arnold, which is an animated thing you guys probably are familiar with, or your kids or grandkids are. And I thought to myself, that's an odd credential to promote, but that's what Dom wants. That's what I'll do. So, I get up and I introduce him as, the voice of Hey Arnold. He comes out, kind of makes a funny face at me. And for the next 20 minutes, he roasts me like he roasted Bruce Willis. He says, that fucking little bald alien guy, I told him one thing. I told him to say that I was the voice of Ernie Batts on Hey Arnold, and he screwed that up too. And so I'm shrinking. We got 4 more shows to do that weekend, and I'm thinking I'm done. And just listening, and so I go up after the show, and I said, "Hey Dom, I'm sorry. I thought I wrote it down just like you asked me to." And he goes, "Yeah, you said it just like I wanted you to."
A comic foil.
Yeah, so I introduced him the same way for the next shows.
Him in years. I worked with him 10 years ago, and he's still milking dynamite.
Where'd you work with him, Frank?
George Lopez show.
Oh, the George Lopez show. Okay.
How is he?
He's great. He's got to be mid-70s. He stayed and met with all the comics and spent the afternoon giving us input and telling us his story. He really only does dynamite one time in his sets now. He does a little bit of that, but he's just a road dog. He's just out there. He's pimping his book that he's finally written, which is actually a very good book, and talks about working on the show and trying to take what he learned. He's old school. He was opening up in strip clubs and opening up for singers and all that type of stuff. He did work with the Black Panthers. They were the audience of his. So he goes way back.
He paid some dues. He definitely paid his dues. Yeah, he did.
He did. He never. I think there's a little bit of a bit of a chip on his shoulder that he didn't get some of the opportunities that his contemporaries did. But I'm not so sure he would have enjoyed whatever late night talk show host. I think he's really made for the road.
Yeah, a lot of guys have not had. What do I try? Let me try to say this correctly. A lot of guys are embittered because they have a certain amount of success early in their 20s and 30s, and it never carries on for the rest of their life. But Jimmy was.
Well, it's such a tough racket, Frank. Like stand-up comedy. Woody Allen, when he first started doing stand-up, he stopped doing it because of the lifestyle. It's a tough lifestyle.
Yeah.
You're going to be 1 minute you're in Albuquerque, New Mexico, then you're in bumfuck Egypt, then you're here, you're there, you're doing a weekend here, a weekend there, a weekend there. And I've seen comics that are really, really good and have been at it for 30 years that I opened for. and they're worn out, man. When you're 52, 50, expect to be the next Robin. Expect to be the next Robin Williams. That's what you're shooting for.
Yes, because who'd you say? Robin Williams.
Yeah, you're shooting for that. But of course,
but Robin Williams was one in a galaxy.
And so is George Carlin.
Yes, but like I said, or like I've said on the show in the past, you have to diversify. You can't just be a comedian in the 20s and be a comedian in the 70s. You've got to be able to produce your own stuff. You've got to be able to write your own stuff. You've got to be able to direct your own stuff. You've got to be able to involved in multiple factors of what it is you do. And, a guy like Jimmy was just a comic. A guy like Dom was just a comic. I'll tell you a quick story about Dom. He was supposed to have been in his own series in like 1990, early 90s. And he was replaced by, of all people, Carlos Mencia. And he was promised this role, and Carlos replaced him. So we were in a casting session with Carlos one day, and the president of Fox says, "Relax, Carlos, you've got the job." And Carlos said to the president of Fox, "Yeah, that's what you told Dom too."
Yeah.
So Dom couldn't act.
Yeah.
So, he couldn't make the jump from stand-up comedian to actor. That's a hard jump to make.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. But like I said, I've seen guys that I really admire. I think that are great comics. Of course, they're not. There's so many comics, right, Michael? There's so many out there. Everybody's a comic. Everybody's a Facebook scientist. Everybody's a Facebook lawyer. But there's so many out there. But I see guys that I really admire, and I'd open for them. And they're, of course, I'm 73, so they were 20 years younger than me. But I could see that they're worn out. They're worn out because they've been doing comedy for 30 years at 52.
Yeah, and they're
worn out.
They've been, bus and truck show.
Exactly.
You're in a city one night, you're in another city another night, you're in the third city the third night, and you're doing the same material. I got to ask you, Michael, with me, I'm terrible. I'm a terrible comic in front of 7 or 8 people that are scattered across the room. Mm-hmm. I'm a really good comic if you put 600 people in a packed room. I find that like shooting fish in a barrel. How many times you worked in front of 600 people? About maybe 12. Not that see me. I'm just teasing. Yeah. They're not there to see me, obviously. A couple of contests that I was always in the finals and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, the bigger the crowd, the easier it is. But the more juice you get. Exactly. And you live on juice. And the more juice and the more feedback you get. And interestingly enough, Frank, if you do comedy, suppose you're doing 30 minutes in front of 600 people. Well, your 30 minutes turns into 20 minutes. Because the joke's got to go all the way to the balcony and then come all the way back down, and you got to wait so you don't step on your line. When you're doing 6 or 7 people, it's hard.
It's hard. And the hardest, of course, and when you're getting started, this happens a lot. It's 6 or 7 people, and they're all other comics. That's the worst. They're not even thinking about you. They're thinking about their own set. It's crickets. Yeah. Oh, it's awful. If you happen to say something good, that they're not laughing, and if you bomb, they kind of enjoy that.
Oh, they love it.
You pick and choose, and open mics are the thing when you're getting started. In Jacksonville, there's only one really decent comedy club. Everything else is a venue that maybe does something else during the week, and then they convert to comedy. A package store. Yeah, exactly. What I was able to do, with lawyering before the world shut down, was I would be in Austin or I would be in Oregon for a deposition or for a hearing, and I could pick up a guest spot while I was there, so I could see how my jokes played to another audience. And I look forward to getting back to that pretty soon. I love the line when you said the comics love seeing other comics bomb. And that's absolutely true. Of course. There's nothing like a comic sitting there watching another guy die on stage. W.C. Fields had a great line. And they said, how do you make people laugh? And W.C. Fields says, well, if you want to make people laugh, he says, you could take a man, dress him up as a woman, and throw him down a flight of stairs. That's going to make people laugh. You want to make a comic laugh, you got to throw a woman down a flight of stairs. Because we like disaster, So, so who's your favorite comic at the moment, and who do you admire? Yeah, so Dad, I would probably say Mitch Hedberg. I really just loved the way he approached things, and obviously he played up the drug addict persona, which happened to apparently be a true one for him. But his humor was so intellectual and so funny. And Stephen Wright, love, seen him a handful of times. I really like Dimitri Martin. I think he happens to have gone to law school as well. He dropped out of a very good law school after 2 years to go do comedy, having never done comedy before. So he kind of approached comedy like I approach running. But I really like him. I think he uses as few words as possible, not a lot of fat, and just very provocative intellectual jokes.
So, Michael, if somebody wants to get involved in Freed to Run, how do they get involved in the
thanks.
Philanthropy?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. So I'm pretty easy to find. So Freed is my name, Freed. So Freed to Run is FREEDTO run.com. And my comedy is Freed to Laugh. So I try to keep it simple.
And do you have Freed to Lawyer as well?
No, that's gunster.com.
Free my client.
Free my client.
It's a pretty decent name, as you could appreciate, Billy, for a lawyer, Freed. But I do business stuff, so none of my clients are in jail, and if they are, I'm not the one to get them out. I can visit them.
Well, we used to call it, we never called it jail. We always called it college. They went away to college. Where's that guy? Oh, he went away to college for a few years.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
I tell you, a buddy of mine was got arrested for armed robbery, oddly enough, a buddy of mine. And he came back from Korea during the Korean War. He came back, tough guy, Marine, really tough guy.
Tough guy.
He was a tough guy.
Tough guy, I tell you.
Guy, yeah. He was tough. And
how tough was he?
Well, I was talking to him one day. He's at a bar, and I know the guy's a high school dropout, but he went, to Korea and Marine. And he says to me, when I was studying philosophy, and I said, hold on a second. I says, when did you ever study philosophy? I says, you're a high school dropout. He goes, when I was in jail. When I was in jail, he said, I got to go back and see the old campus. He goes, it's been a while.
There's something to be said for that. One of my favorite scenes in, you remember, the movie with Steve McQueen, The Great Escape.
Uh-huh.
And, he keeps getting thrown back in the little cell, and he brings his baseball glove and his ball, and he just gets amazing at catching the ball off the various corners of the cell. And I've always thought on some of my worst days, what I need is to be locked up in a cell for a little while with just something I can practice and get really good at. A pair of drumsticks or
the Cooler something. King. I think that's what he was called. The Cooler King. McQueen was in that movie. Yeah.
Billy locked up in a little room. He could have a lot of fun with himself.
Sounds like he's already really good at
that. It's a very tangled mass inside this brain of mine.
But I guess all comics, it's a tangled web inside your head. We've always talked about what motivates a comic, and a comic has got to be a little bit damaged, I think.
Oh yeah, I agree. Do you think that, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, I think all humans are pretty damaged. I think comics.
The governor of Florida is certainly damaged. Oh,
he's got some issues, but for sure. No, I think what comics do is we exploit our damagedness, and I think that's what other people relate to. So I don't know if we're any more screwed up than anybody else, but we're willing to just stand up there and be
put it out there.
The microscope. Yeah, exactly.
Put it out there.
Yeah, that takes guts. Like you said, not afraid to bomb. One of the reasons it took me so long to get 10 minutes is because I used to use the same 10 because the thought of bombing, I learned to realize it's just growth. Let me ask you a question. As a lawyer, do you think it helped you with comedy? Like my girlfriend, when I first started doing comedy, was a teacher, and she said, when you got somebody talking, and it was a great piece of advice. She said, when people are just talking, they're not trying to be disruptive, but they're in the front row and they're talking while you're in your set. She goes, you don't have to say anything to them. Just walk in front of them and stand in front of them with the microphone, like a teacher would do if you're talking in class. You don't have to say anything. They just walk over in front of the desk and you're going to shut up because the teacher's in front of you. It's the same thing. So she gave me like a little tip, and I said, wow, a teacher actually, that helps do you think it helped being a lawyer? Be a comic?
Well, it certainly made me more confident, but probably I had the wrong kind of confidence, because what I've been trying to do now is, public speaking for a legal audience is not the most entertaining. It's not funny. And so, I really have to downplay the polishedness of being a lawyer. because I think it comes off as condescending, and that's not the type of comic I want to be. I don't want to be arrogant. So you got to cater to your audience. So it definitely gave me a confidence. I don't mind standing up with a microphone. I don't mind, having an outline of what I need to say. I do that all day, every day. But then making it relatable and making myself the butt of the jokes, that doesn't play very well in a courtroom.
Yeah. So and you are a trial lawyer, correct? So you do stand up in front of juries and judges and you do that for a living.
Yeah. I mean, it's a slow-moving litigation, so I'm not a personal injury guy, but people fighting over corporate issues, intellectual property, that kind of stuff is what I get into court for. That's exactly right.
And you do juries. You do juries, right? You make Perry Mason type opens and closes.
I hope so. I do it or I fail to do so, right?
Yeah.
But that's what I try to do. You got to bring in a bunch of people that don't have the least bit of interest in what you're talking about, haven't asked to be there, or having to take time off work, have no background in the matter, and make them interested in something for a week, and that's a whole different kind of audience.
Let me ask you, a show like Bull, you do voir dire and all.
Voir dire, yeah.
You do that all. Are there any shows on TV that actually capture what it is you do?
None of them are perfect, just because I have a show that's what I do, sitting in an office, doing research or talking to my colleagues about how to approach a case. But, the most enjoyable parts of my job are what they focus on, just like, the medical shows on TV focus on the surgeries and I guess people sleeping with each other in the hospital.
Well, I can tell you as a fireman, if the fire department was like they show on television, there'd be nobody alive.
Yeah.
Never mind on the show. I mean,
But
yeah, so
there's no real legal show that capture.
There are. I mean, some of the movies do. I learned things from some of them. I forget which movie it was, but maybe it was The Lincoln Lawyer, but a movie with where he asked in his voir dire, to have the jurors describe their bumper stickers. I think that's a great question. So I take I take from them as much as I'm sure they take from us, because what's a better way to find out what somebody's all about than to ask them, do you care enough about something to have a bumper sticker? What is it?
Especially in Florida.
That's remarkable. So selecting a jury, that'd be a great question, a great lead for selecting a jury.
Yeah, no, I think it is. Yeah, absolutely. But no, there's shows that capture it pretty well. I mean, Law and Order, for all of its clichéness and formulaicness, usually takes a legal issue that's percolating or has percolated, and of course, they change the names and all that. But they do a good job of addressing the issue. Now they have a crime, it's committed, and it's solved and tried in an hour. That doesn't usually happen, but everything else is pretty realistic.
Hey, Mike, you've been a great guest. I know Derek probably has a question and Billy has a question. So if you guys want to ask one more question to Michael before we wrap this up, feel free.
I have 25 questions. The first question is, how many pairs of shoes do you go through when you're running these marathons? Curious.
That is a good question. Yeah, just I get 2 new pairs just before the runs, about a month before, so I can work them out, and then I just alternate a pair a day. So it's 157.2 miles and 2 pairs of shoes, and they're pretty worn out by the time, because the pavement, it's asphalt I'm running on, and that asphalt heats up and the rubber kind of melts and breaks down.
Right. Running on asphalt doesn't have any effect on your joints or bones, or you'll tell me in 10 years.
I mean, it's better than concrete. Asphalt gives more than the concrete, like a sidewalk, but and obviously it's smoother. The weird thing about it, and again, why real runners probably wouldn't do it, is I'm running on an angled side of the road. I'm running in the shoulder, so one leg's lower than the other leg, and so that sort of wears you out. And occasionally I'll just switch to the other side of the road, but now I'm facing head-on traffic, which is probably not the smartest thing to do either.
And what do you eat? What's your diet look like to deal with inflammation and soreness and stuff?
Yeah, I try to reduce the carbs, eat turmeric or turmeric-related things, and then while I'm running, because again, I'm not breaking any records, I'm getting about 100 calories per per every few miles to replenish what I'm burning out there.
Great.
What do you eat in that?
Whatever I want.
Right.
Yeah.
I eat a lot of junk because you're kind of a furnace. I try to eat good quality junk like, cashew chews and granola bars, but sometimes I'll just have popcorn or something like that because you just want you can replace water, but you need those electrolytes. And so if you can get some salt in there, even with something that's not so good, that's a good way to keep your energy level up for, 4 hours out there on the road.
Billy, any closing thoughts?
One quick question before you. And you were a terrific guest and very interesting guy. And
thanks, guys. I appreciate it. I love what you're doing, and I'm privileged to be a part of it.
Oh no, we're privileged to have you on. And your diversity is remarkable, and what you do for the indigent, what you do for the poor, is really. I think that's just wonderful. I really do. My quick question to you is: who's the most generous comic that you ever opened for? Who do you think is that you had the most affinity with?
Yeah, it's a good question. Again, only been at it a couple of years, but I told you how Don Marrera hazed me, but you know what? He took me out to dinner and talked to me about the old days, talked to me about comedy, gave me some feedback on some of my jokes that he liked, things that he likes about openers and doesn't like. And, I'll always be grateful for that. He's not the only one that's poured into me that way. Henry Cho's been great. Jimmy Walker was tremendous in what he shared. And I'm looking forward to Taylor Williamson. I think I can learn a lot from him because, a little younger guy, newer at it. So I learned something from everybody.
Henry Cho's a great guy. Henry Cho's an Asian comic who grew up in the South. And that's what his act is. And he's a terrific guy. He's often been called no show Cho because he's make all of his appearances, but he's a terrific comic.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that, but yeah, he calls himself the South Korean because he's what's he from, Kentucky?
Yeah,
he is very funny.
Yeah,
very funny.
Well, Michael, you've been a great guy, been a great guest. Please say hello to all my friends in Jacksonville. Especially say a big hello to Artis Gilmore, Tim Cost, Christine Sapienza, Chuck Woodhouse, John Harrison, and all those other people, my friends from Jacksonville. And I'll look forward to seeing you on my next trip into town.
Thanks, guys. I look forward to it and appreciate you having me on.
Great. Thank you so much.
Great job.
Thank you very much, Michael.
So, another good guest.
Yes, he was a fascinating guy. Very good guest. I guess just being that diverse and being good at what he does and raising all of that money for the poor.
Yeah, that's really a big deal.
Took over $1 million, Frank.
Yeah.
And by running across the country, that's terrific. He must be awful good at networking.
You have to be. Well, I think, if you look at his career path, to be a good lawyer, you have to be a good networker. And if you're a good networker, that can pay off. that can pay off in your philanthropy. And then if you pay it off in your philanthropy, that can turn into pretty good basis for comedy. So I really like guys like Michael Fried, like Billy O'Connor, guys who are diverse in their interests and try new things. Even Derek Harrison now, our guy behind the board, this is a whole new foray for him because he came to me with an idea. He said, "Why don't you guys do a podcast?" I would have never done a podcast. I would never thought to do a podcast. And Derek said, "I think you guys can do it." And and he's become a pretty good switcher and technical guy.
Sure has. Again, I don't know how many people, how good we are at this, but it's certainly fun and it keeps your mind active and we're not killing anybody,
Not yet.
Not yet.
And if we do, we can get Mike Fried to defend us.
I'll tell you a quick story. I got to tell you a quick story about bombing in comedy. I was doing a set, and I was supposed to do 45 minutes at the Tepe Center for the Performing Arts, actually, and I was headlining. And the guy who's running the show said to me, Bill, I know you do dirty comedy. He says, but do yourself a favor, because I know you're raw. with this audience, try and be as clean as possible, because he goes, you'll go further with this audience, which is like what they say in golf, every bet in golf is won or lost on the first hole.
Right.
It's the same thing with comedy. You read your audience. If you got to read them wrong, you're done. So I said, all right, I'll try and be clean. But I didn't have 45 minutes of clean. I had an hour and a half of dirty, but I didn't have 45 minutes of clean. So I said, I'll try and get through it. And I said, you know what? I got a lot of opinion about politics. I'll do 15 minutes of politics and throw it in there, and stay clean. So I go out there and I start doing, Romney was running against Obama at the time. So I start doing Romney jokes, jokes about magic underwear and stuff like that, That weren't very polished, but I figured, look, I stay clean. Well, I start with this political jokes in the first 5 minutes, and I'm doing 45. And the audience is about 200 people, and they're, dressed to the nines. They're all in tuxedos and wraparound minks, and really dressed. And I start doing 10 minutes, and I see the faces just die. Their mouths start opening like they're and I lost them. I lost them the first 10, and I got to do 35 more. Well, here's where it comes down to reading your audience. I find out later on that I'm doing comedy in front of a Mormon hospital. And I'm doing Mormon jokes. Now, if I would have did dirty jokes, it's no problem. These are doctors and nurses. You're talking about the human body. That's not a problem. But I'm doing Mormon jokes in a Mormon hospital, and I died right. It was the longest 45 minutes I've ever been on stage. I wanted to hang myself after the first 15 because they weren't coming back. No matter what I was going to do after that, I was done.
Well, we're coming back next week. So say goodnight, Billy.
Good night, everybody, and thanks very much for tuning in.
And remember, if these lips could talk, available on Amazon. Lamar's Gamble, available on Amazon. Amikamukanamike.com, the podcast.
Right, Amazon or Acclaim, if these lips could talk, and on your bookshelf right next to it should be Lamar's Gamble.
And you should check out our website because our website's got everything. It's got a podcast, it's got blogs, it's got books, it's got all sorts of things to keep your feeble minds occupied.
Yeah, it also has pictures of me and Frank Barchester, which I think all of you guys should have in your repertoire.
Say goodnight, Billy. Good night, Derek.
Good night, Derek.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Next week's guest, she's the former CEO of the Brewers. He's a longtime MLB executive, Wendy and Laurel Priebe.
We'll see you next week.